Hi there, how you doing? Welcome back to the workbench, and now by popular demand, your votes, I'm going to start work on the 3 locos that you chose to get a service and running video. And first up is the one that I'm most fearsome of, and that is the rather beautiful Bachmann 4MT tank. And I'm fearsome because she's complicated and delicate, so we'll see how we get on. As ever with these jobs, the first thing I do is take a look at the maintenance sheet that you get with the locos, and if you haven't got one, here's a good tip for you. Head over to Lendons of Cardiff, their website. They're compiling a really large database now of manuals and instruction sheets for locomotives. They've got mainline, airfix, everything there, and they've even got this one now as I popped it across to them. So if you can't find what you need, then Lendons of Cardiff, I'll put a link in the box of the video, is the place to go to find a really large database of instruction manuals. Right, let's have a look at the loco in close-up. So there she is. Now the first point that I've noticed is that we have a speedo cable here, which will need to be unscrewed because that attaches up to the body. And there are 5 screws on the chassis that attach the body. There's one either side in this sort of area, one at the front, 2 at the back. So we'll need to get them out, but say the first job will be to do that. I think what we'll do, we'll stick her up on the test track and just see what sort of condition she's in, if she's running or not. I hope she's running. Fingers crossed. Oh yeah, she's going. Rather grindy, so it sounds like the gears have dried out, but nonetheless we're moving, so it shouldn't be too hard a job, but we'll do a full service because it hasn't been done for a long time. First job then is to remove that crank screw. I don't know how tight it's going to be. No, not too bad at all. So as it's not too tight, we'll stand by with the tweezers to catch it in case it tries to fly away. Coming out reasonably quickly, a little bit tight as it comes out, funnily enough. A little bit of dust wrapped around it. It's a long screw. Now I'm going to put the screw back in to keep the coupling rod in place, and also the main thing is it also keeps the screw in place so we don't lose him. Very fiddly. Once we get a few turns, it should be fine. Now these Bachmann 4MT tanks are beautiful, and when they first came out though, because I got one of the first batch, it transpired their motors were defective, and you could send it back. I think it was Hatton's, I'm not sure, can't remember. You could send them back and they would remotor them, or you could do it yourself. I chose to do it myself, and there is the defective motor. No size, is it? But there was something wrong with that batch, and so they sent out new ones, which I fitted. So I have had to do all this before. Right, that screws nicely back into the wheel there. So now we'll turn her over in the cradle and have a look at those screws on the underside. Quick bit of handheld. It's the, according to the instructions, it's the front screw that you can see there under the front of the loco. And those side ones, can you see them peeping out either side there? Just back behind the wheels. And then at the back, if we move the magnifier, there's 2 either side of the back of the bogie. You can just see them there. So that's what I'm going to take out next. I imagine it's going to be fiddly, and we'll see how we get on. Right, we're apart now. A note on the screws. The front screw is the longest one, followed by the 2 silver medium ones, and the rear 2 screws are the shortest of all, little black ones. One of the things to note is that there was another pipe that luckily pulled out nicely. It's just here, and that needs to be slotted in to the chassis before it gets put in and pulled out. Quite a bit of weight in there, it's heavy, We also got quite a bit of excess oil, which will be cleaned up next. Right, we set the body aside. I've also removed this, which sits in that slot there, and is the pipework under the cab, and it also holds the speedo crank. So we can set this aside so that it can't be damaged, and it just goes in quite easily, it would seem. So that's going to go in my pot of bits, whilst we have a close look at what we've got mechanism wise. And what I can see is we've got a lot of that old white grease, which appears to have gone quite thick and gooey. There's the new motor. You can see it was a Buller one. We've got DCC blanking plug up this end, and some wires leading down to the chassis. So it's a nice little mechanism, and will benefit from a good old clean up. Right, how I like to start then is to remove as much of the old white grease as possible, using a cocktail stick and a bit of cloth. Yeah, it is quite thick and gooey. You see it's all in the worm. I suppose it would be. You can turn that and just get it out. I don't know what it is about the old lubricants that seem to dry up and become so hard. At least the new ones promise not to do that. That's the Labelle's Hobby Lubes and things like that. So you've got the original straight drive off the worm onto that cob, down to that fixed one, down to a transitional one, and then that goes on, if the camera's getting that, it goes down onto the wheel axle. So that's the drive there. I'm going to clean up the gears off camera because it's boring for you. You can see what I've done, what I'm going to do. Alright, we've had a good old clean up. So it's time to re-lubricate. Now, Labelle 102 is actually a gear lubricant, and that's what it's going to get on top of the worm. Also, on the front motor bearing, so just one drop down there. Now, Labelle 102 is electrically neutral, so we can trust one small drop on the rear motor bearing. Now, what they say about this, too little is okay, too much is a new motor, particularly where the brushes are. So we've had the Labelle 102 on the worm, and that will work its way down nicely. Also do the pinions of the gears, because they'll rotate, and we can do all of those quite successfully from here. Now, Labelle 106 is also a white grease, but it's really good. It won't go hard and horrible. So we're just going to put a good bit of that onto the gear chain in the middle. And you see it's more of a clear lubricant than the white one really. But it's excellent. We've had some really good results using this. What I'm going to quickly do is put her on the track, turn her over, and then we'll put a bit more on. You're back with me having to check the camera is working for you. So a little bit down there. And again in here. This is a loco, we don't want to be opening too much. So I'm going to make sure that she's well done. There we go, that's re-lubricated. So that's quite simple really. We've done the chassis, now it's just replacing it. Although I've just spotted something that I am unsure of. I don't know what's going on here. It looks like rust, but we'll have a close look. Whatever it was, it just came off. I wonder if it was just some dried up lube from there. Because obviously all this valve gear works, so it will need lubricating. I think we'll do that once we're all back together. So it's body reassembling time. I've gone away and washed my hands because we don't want greasy marks all over the bodywork. Now remembering that I've got to put this piece on first, which sits there in a slot. And it actually sits down flush, so that's good. And we'll offer the body to the chassis and see how reluctant or otherwise it is. Well, that was fun and games, I can tell you now. Let's let you see through the magnifier, see if that's any better. That pipe that I said went underneath actually goes into a hole in the chassis, but it's not a problem, it's quite loose fit. But what was problematic was getting the whole thing back into the body. It is incredibly tight. You have to aim for a completely flat press down. So by that I mean no tilt either way, and you also watch that the sides do go in between the chassis frames. Really tight and unpleasant to do. Let's carry on with the reassembly. Welcome back. Well, what ensued was several battles. The first battle was getting the chassis back in the body. If you got the chimney in, the back wouldn't go in. If you got the back in, the chimney wouldn't go in. And you'd literally have to fettle and hold it tightly and push until you get it all lined up, and eventually it will start to go in. And then when you put the screws in, it draws it all back down. I don't know if something's warped or it's just always been this way. But of course, you've got nothing to hold on because it's so spindly. It's like a blooming daddy long legs, and the legs just fall off as soon as you look at them. But eventually I managed to get it in. Then this piece wasn't as easy as I'd thought. It was clipped in to the bottom of the tanks and then hung around that bracket that we saw that goes through to the speedo on the other side, and that resulted in trying to super glue things back together. A nasty blob of super glue got on the side of the tank there. Evil stuff, won't stick apart from anywhere where you don't want it to. But this I had to just do the best I could, hanging it back on that bracket and keeping it clear of the driving wheels and things. You can see it sits quite close, otherwise it's going to foul them and the bogey wheels. So what started off as a simple project ended up as an absolute pig, and I think that's why in my database, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but this loco is regarded as a complete bastard to work on. It's just poorly designed, and it's just designed to fall apart and break. Alrighty, calm yourself down. Whew. Apart from a nasty mark on the cab, it all looks okay. But what we do have to do is take the bottom plate off so we can check the wheel bearings. Now you have to release the brake gear and pivot it on the back fitting. It's still tight to the screw, but at least you can get all the others. So fearfully, let's get the bottom plate off and see what we've got. Front bogey and all screws removed. So trying to get the camera in focus. We've been thwarted in our attempt to lift the bottom plate because where they've glued on the sandboxes, they've glued them between the chassis and the bottom plate. So you just can't lift it without breaking and risking breaking off the sandboxes. Ew, this is one of those locos, isn't it? Bottom plate back in place. Not that I had any choice, as I say, it was glued in place, unfortunately. So what I've done is carefully put some Label 102 on the axles down the sides. So we're now going to do wheel cleaning and lubricating of the coupling rods. Now when it comes to coupling rods, I go back to my hobby lube oils and a light oil. It's just nice and convenient to use. And we just add a drop to each of the cranks. And then everything that we see that moves, so the crosshead, its connections, the piston itself and the slide bars, all need a little drop. Some of it doesn't move, it's just decorative, but if it moves, it'll help to have a little bit of oil on it. Not forgetting the knuckle at the back. The lens is distorting for you, I'm sorry, and the rear crank. So finally we have her back on the track. Everything's in place. Apart from one glue stain. There she goes, no more grinding, nice and smooth. 4MT ready for service, but not going to be serviced for some very long time, I can tell you that. Oh no, I'm not going to get bitten twice. Anyway, lovely looking loco, all serviced, so next time you see her I'll have her running with an appropriate train. Cheers for now.